Yes, good morning and welcome to Council Matters. And if you were wondering why we started off with the immortal Lou Reed, it's because instead of taking a walk on the wild side, myself and my guest today, John Suttle, we've had a walk on the north side, John, haven't we?
Yes, I walked the last 2 miles, abandoned my car.
Well, we could have been a couple of proclaimers, and we might have had to walk 500 miles. But yes, there's apparently some. I don't know if the Gardaí are doing a piece of traffic management training or what, but it'd have to be one of the most inept pieces of management that I have ever seen in all my living life. What about yourself?
I never had to abandon my car, I have to say.
Yeah,
because
except
the
for
traffic-
perhaps for floods, I would imagine.
Well, not even that.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get down to today's business at hand, because my guest today is John Suttle, and John is from the Irish National Schools Trust. John, welcome to Council Matters.
Thank you very much, Mick.
Yes. John, now I've got to start off with the bio piece, in the sense that I know you as a man who likes to cycle through the eternal city, and you maybe, as we say, boycott a few Middle Eastern flora or things like that. But I'm just wondering, how did you come to be involved with the Educational Trust? What's the background to all of that?
Well, the background is that somebody tapped me on the shoulder in 1998 at a school meeting in Clontarf when they were looking for a representative for the board, and said, why don't you go on?
Okay.
And I had no idea of going on, but I said, sure, why not give it a go? And I went on the board of management, and I loved it. I felt I could make a contribution, and this was back, and I spent 4 years on boards of management, was on lots of parents' associations, got very interested, and I found that I eventually had to resign from the board of management of my local national school because they introduced in 2002 religious discrimination in the admissions policy.
Okay. Yeah.
The so-called Catholics First admissions policy, which I simply couldn't agree with, and what I found was really appalling was that I was expected to say nothing. I was expected to just keep quiet and go away.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just wondering, John, now, before we get the tweets or the emails or anything like that, if anybody thinks I have a conflict of interest in this, I will declare it here and now. I'm not a Catholic. So what happens in Catholic schools, per se, is not really of any concern of mine or even any interest. However, national schools are a different thing because they are apparently state. What's your background to that, John? Is there any conflict of interest at all that people might say, are you a non-Catholic? I'm not going to interest.
No, but I mean, immediately, Mick, you've gone down the road of using the wrong terminology.
Okay, fine. Correct me on this, yes.
There are 3,200 national schools in Ireland, and there's not one of them that is called a Catholic national school, because it is a contradiction in terms.
Sure.
Now, I was brought up a Catholic. In the 1960s, I could say the Mass in Irish, Latin and English.
Yeah. Like myself.
Yes, indeed. Well, and I have 5 children. All of them were baptised.
Mm-hmm.
I went to the local national school in Clontarf.
Okay.
My children went to the same school.
Mm-hmm.
But as a Catholic, I didn't want to discriminate against non-Catholics. I wanted to be involved. I was talking to my brother the other day, and he said he still felt shame at not being friends with the Protestants in Clontarf where I grew up, because we went to different schools.
Sure.
And he felt that we should be ashamed of that, and I agree completely, because I would be very happy to know all my neighbours.
I would put it to you, I didn't grow up in Clontarf, even though I live there now. We also went to different scouts. We played different sports. The era that you and I grew up in, it was segregated development to a certain degree, was it not? I'm not trying to defend it, John. I'm just trying to do.
No, but the difference between the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, when I grew up and went to school, and now, is that at that time we all voluntarily went. So my parents sent me voluntarily to the local school under Catholic patronage. Your parents sent you wherever they wanted to send you, but it was all voluntary. All of the schools at that time were open to all children of different religious beliefs, and they all had a system of having separate religious education. So that in my school, in the late 50s and early 60s, catechism, as we taught it, went on from 9 to 9:30. And then they were put away, and the rest of the school day went on after that.
Yeah.
But that's all changed now.
Yeah, yeah. I would also suggest to you, John. And again, I don't want to get sidetracked on this, but I'm just harking back to another era. We segregated people on gender.
Well, we
uh,
don't fight. International Schools Trust, we don't fight that because, in fact, separate boys and girls schools was extremely common in the national school system. Again, the two-room school in Clontarf originally had one room was the boys' school and one room was the girls' school, and even in the 1840s when it was set up, they were set up as two separate schools.
Yeah.
So what we're looking to do is try and ensure the system as it was previously is at least defended. Now, I would personally believe that co-education is a great improvement, and most schools have taken on co-education, but that's not so controversial. But this concept of religious discrimination admissions is new. That was always part of the national school system.
No. As I say, I'm very interested in particularly how this has evolved over, say, the last 20 years, because we've had some major social changes, but this seems to be one that's a bit slower to happen, if I'm correct, John. But something, if I could go right back, because when I looked at your presentation, it seems we had a better deal, dare I say it, under perfidious Albion than we did once we got independence. What's the background to that? Tell us the history there, John.
There is a concept somewhere that everybody sort of has some idea that the system started off as all religions together, but quickly it started segregating. But the legislation remained the same. So, I mean, even today, in the O'Keefe case, or in any cases dealing with national schools, they still refer to the legislation of 1831, the Stanley Letter, and it is still relevant legally today.
Tell the listeners what that is effectively saying then.
Well, the Stanley Letter, because the Stanley Letter addressed the issues in Ireland in the 1830s, just post-emancipation, and they wanted to help the poor in Ireland, and they set up a state system of education in Ireland for the poor. So the national school system was not designed to teach everybody. Half the population was expected to go to private schools they had been then.
Sure,
and this was set up for the poor. But they wanted to ensure that the religious divide, which had dominated this country since the Reformation, was addressed. And they were determined that the national school system would not continue this division. So they set up a system that was legally non-denominational. But, as I say, what happened was that people segregated themselves. The Catholic bishops particularly insisted that their children not be taught by somebody other than a Catholic.
Did that come in before independence? And I'm talking 1922 here.
Well, what happened in independence, again, another myth, another fiction, as people say. There's some concept that somehow through independence things changed. But in fact, the Anglo-Irish Treaty of 1920, the one Michael Collins has negotiated, has 18 clauses in it. Military, political, economic. There's only one social clause, and that social clause is to continue the national school system into the new state. And it is the only social clause in a very short treaty, and it says that where the state is supporting education, there can be no religious discrimination in the school, and there must be separate religious instruction to ensure that any child can go to the school. That was continued in the 1922 Constitution, word for word, continued in the 1937 Constitution in Articles 42 and 44. So that same provision from 1831 carried right through independence and into the Constitution of 1937. Even though, supposedly De Valera is very Catholic and all that, but in fact, these were these were Republicans who knew.
Okay, now you're going to have to help me out on this one, John, because I don't quite grasp the nuance of it. Did the Irish Constitution, effectively the document that we constantly amend at the moment, did that not supersede pre-existing legislation?
Yes. No, the Constitution is a preeminent legislation
today. It is. That's what
today.
I was saying. That was the benchmark for everything. Yes.
And subject to that are legislation like the 1998 Education Act and the 2000 Equal Status Act, but they're subject to the Constitution. And the Stanley Letter remains in place except for those parts of it that might have been amended by the Constitution or by legislation. So the Constitution is the primary legislation in Ireland, and it insists in Article 44.24, which has been discussed in the Supreme Court, in the High Court, by the Irish Human Rights Commission, the Equality Authority, and everybody is in agreement that it gives the right for every child to go to their local school and to be allowed to go there without having to go to religious instruction at that school.
Okay. Again, this is where you might have to help me out. And does the preamble not give the wiggle room? And I'm going to go into this here in the sense that I'm a non-Christian. Therefore, I always find the preamble to the Constitution discriminatory because it says that all laws will be made taking into consideration Jesus Christ. That's fine. I'm not objecting to that for Christians, but I would suspect the Muslims might have a bit of an issue with that. I certainly have an issue with that. Now, but it only becomes an issue in practical terms. Now,
well, legally, what happened? In the 1800s, they talked about all Christians having rights.
Yes.
But with the 1937 Constitution, regardless of the preamble, the rights were given to all religious beliefs and none.
Yeah.
So it widened the rights from just Christians to Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, and atheists. All have an equal right of entry to the school.
Yeah. No, I agree, John, and I should state at the outset, I am not against faith-based education. However, and I'm going to put this on the record, I do have a problem with the state funding it. You know, I'm used to state-based education, but it's always private.
But this is where the line is crossed. What people misunderstand is that the Constitution gives parents a right to send their children to a faith-based denominational school, but only privately funded.
Absolutely.
The term they use is private schools are according to their means. The line is crossed when you come to state funding, and with state-funded schools, you cannot have a discriminatory policy. If you happen to be lucky that the local school that you go to has a patron of the same religion as you, you will get free denominational education, but you don't have a right to it. If your local school is Church of Ireland and you're Catholic, you have a right to go to the school, but you don't have a right to Catholic religious instruction in that school.
Oh yeah. No, what about preference then? And I tell you the situation that comes to mind. My daughter, who wasn't born in Ireland and wasn't raised as a Catholic, when we were looking at putting her through secondary school, she was just finishing. She went to one of the schools in Kilbarrack, a mixed denominational school. When we were then having a look at the local schools, the one that obviously came to mind was Mount Temple on the Malahide Road.
Yeah.
She had preference for Mount Temple. She didn't have to do an entrance exam or anything like that because she was baptised an Anglican. Now, are we talking the same thing here, John?
We're obviously the Irish National School, so we are primarily dealing with primary level.
Okay.
But the Constitution and the Equal Status Act apply equally to secondary schools.
So
the Equal Status Act,
to be fair, that's 15 years ago, so I don't know if they've changed their policy. I'm not going to knock.
No. I believe that they still have. They're Protestants first.
Yeah,
like a general.
Yeah, I remember it when it was Mount Joy, as you probably do yourself.
Yes,
Bono was there even.
Yeah. Well, I went to St. Paul's, and one of the few schools we could beat in rugby. It was Mount Joy. Sometimes, anyway. That the legislation and the Constitution applies equally. So, it might be unfortunate, but minority religions can't discriminate either. It's not like this is not a Catholic issue. It is an issue for all denominations. But keep in mind that the Catholic Church and all the other churches have been trying to get free state-funded denominational education in Ireland since about 1835, for about 180 years. And the first time they've got it, which is illegal at the moment, is in the last 15 years. Another myth is that, in the 1990s, all the schools discriminate on religious grounds. They did not.
Yeah.
The discrimination only came in our school, which was set up in 1848. It only came in 2002. 154 years later, the first child was refused admission.
Why was all of that then? Why did it? Is it a resource issue? And that's one of the things I just wonder is that...
No, it's not a resource issue. Yeah. The one thing, the Department of Education might be not great at everything, but the one thing they are great at is ensuring that everybody will get a place in a national state-funded school.
Okay.
But the fact is some schools, some areas have more population than others just from time to time. And in that case, everybody suffers. Not just the non-Catholics and the atheists. That's illegal. So, if there aren't enough places in the local school, well, everybody suffers. So, both the Catholics, the non-Catholic atheists all have to go looking for other schools. That the Constitution and its Stein letter only deal with religion. The most important, the only thing that's really in in the Constitution is that religion cannot be used as a discriminatory policy. You can.
Yeah.
In the Constitution, you can discriminate on sexual grounds or
Yep.
lots of other grounds, but not religion.
Okay. Come to ask you then, John. I mean, we see the injustice. We see, if you like, the illegality. So how does it still prevail? That's the question I ask you.
What happened? What happened? We don't have a lot of evidence for this, but the Minister has mentioned it, and the Catholic Primary School Management Association, was that a secret deal was done in 1997 between certainly the Catholic Church, but maybe all of the denominations and the Department of Education to discontinue.
Who was the minister at that time? Was it
we don't know. We've Niamh
was it our
Brannock.
friend out on the north side? Or?
Niamh Brannock. No, Niamh Brannock
Brannock.
was for the first part of 1997 and Micheál Martin for the second part. Now we have asked both of these to comment on this, but they haven't done so. But a deal was done in 1997 apparently that between the department and the church to discontinue the national school system and to replace it with a state-funded denominational school system. And they put in place an instrument to change the leases, because the leases are non-denominational. It's a document called a deed of variation.
Yeah, okay.
And this deed of variation was to be signed by the minister. Suddenly, where there was no Catholic mentioned in the deeds, suddenly it was going to be mentioned 32 times.
Okay, I need to get this one clear, John, because people will find this very difficult to believe. Are you saying that this process of discrimination was initiated by a Labour Party minister?
Probably.
Okay, yeah. No, the reason why is because when you mention Niamh Brannock, Niamh's name will always stick in my mind, because when we used to go to a thing called the National Forum on Europe, and when it was either Nice or Lisbon, one of the controversial treaties, Niamh used to be there at every meeting, and she would say the same thing. We used to almost have bets to see when she would say it, and she would always say, "Some people see a plot, but I see a plan." And I'm just wondering if national schools, Niamh saw a plan where the rest of us are seeing a plot.
Well, the deeds of variation were to be signed up, and everybody thought, including, as far as I can see, the Forum on Patriarchy and Pluralism, everybody thought that all of these were signed, because when I was on the board of management, I was told to keep an eye on your deed of variation. But in fact, it turns out they weren't signed. That they don't actually exist. That there were a number of them signed prior to 2006, but a small number. And none of them have been signed in the last 9 years. Because apparently the Attorney General has brought up the obvious problem, which this may well be unconstitutional.
Okay. All right then. If that's the case, why then does not somebody initiate a legal action? I mean, you and I, John, we come from Clontarf. My God, they're quick with the legal actions out there. You just have to have a seawall or a bag of cement, and they'll be out there with
We are encouraging people to look at the concept of bringing a case under the Equal Status Act, under Section 12 of the Equal Status Act, or no, Section 7. But it's very hard. I mean, like, we've been involved in some parents getting their children into school, but once, and they're very, very enthusiastic before they get their child into school. But when they get the child into school, understandably, they
stay stum.
They want to keep quiet, and I can completely understand that. But there are parents coming out. You see Nicola Murphy in Terranure and Rupesh Panikkar out in Cabotili and Paddy Monaghan up in Raheny, who are becoming very, very, very active.
Well, I was say, John, you know now that I'm a fair man. I would give actual parents who are affected by this issue, I would give them airtime if they need it. So, okay, I can understand why individual families or parents might want to not go down this path, but what about organisations that have an interest in this sort of thing, like FLAC, for instance, who are very, very prominent in the issue for gender recognition, or the Irish Human Rights Commission, who were involved in the same-sex marriage issue? Why are they?
The Irish Human Rights Commission did a study of religion and education in Ireland a couple of years ago, but the one thing they omitted were admissions.
Okay.
So they talked about the great problems within the schools of Muslims going to schools where there were Catholic emblems all over the school. But they didn't talk about the fact that the Muslims couldn't get into the schools.
Okay.
The Equality Authority did a report in 2011 called the Clontarf Report. It's available on the internet.
Very, very comprehensive report it is, John, and as I say, makes very, very interesting reading. Yeah.
But there's a lot more since then. Since then we have found that the foundation documents commit all of the national schools in Ireland at their own foundation to be bona fide of the children of all religious denominations. That this really makes the case just so strong.
Okay, I then can I suppose about 2 months ago, I did an interview with a woman who I have a great deal of respect for, which is Gillian Van Turnhout. And Gillian was saying that she sees her remit as making sure that all legislation is child-proof based on the children's referendum. Isn't this an obvious case to take on board and then say, guys, hold on, this is children being discriminated against. This is the net effect. How do you feel about that, John?
Absolutely. Well, the children's ombudsman, who's the children's ombudsman?
Is it Emily Logan?
Emily Logan spoke there about a year ago about saying that she definitely did not want to see this religious discrimination, admissions policy. But again, they wouldn't engage with us. We contacted them and they said, look, we've done our report, that's it.
Yeah.
We send documents to the Immigrant Council, to the Council of Civil Liberties, but it is very hard. We don't have any funds, unfortunately. It is very hard to get people engaged. We send it to the teachers' unions, they won't engage. People seem to be just happy to just go along with this. And I say this, Paddy Monaghan and the present parents are being very, very effective.
Okay. I've got to now ask you, this is an odd question, John, because last night on social media, because I put up notices and saying you're going to be on and you know what we were going to be talking about, and somebody came back. Now I know they've got an association with the Labour Party in Clontarf. I know they were canvassing for Aon last week and they said, ask him, is he still in the Labour Party? So
yes, I am still in the Labour Party. I am still in the Labour Party.
Yeah, because the Clontarf report, my understanding, it was presented to the Labour Party branch out in Clontarf. Is that correct?
It was adopted by the Labour Party. It was adopted, and we brought it to. Actually, we brought it to the precursor to the 2010 Labour Party conference, where it went through.
So is it policy then, or how
no,
close is it?
No, it prior to the formation of the last government, the Labour Party was all for stopping religious discrimination. Unfortunately, when they got into power, we got our Labour Minister, Ho Chi Minh Quinn, who turned out to be just a massive disappointment. He turned down our report on the basis that the Labour Party is all about plurality, which is just the most astounding
You're not
thing.
going to tell me focus group politics, John.
Unfortunately. Now, Jan O'Sullivan is talking about... she is supportive of local children being able to go to local schools, but she's the Minister for Education. She should be acting, not talking. She should be acting. And again, she won't meet with us.
Yeah. John, unfortunately we've run out of time. If you're around the Dame Street area tonight, I believe the City Council are having a special meeting just for you and I and the people of Clontarf. John, isn't that great?
Oh, just I hope that they keep the water in or out or somewhere.
But somewhere, you know, I don't...
No wall, please.
No, well, as I say, whatever they do, I'm glad they're just setting the time aside to talk about me. But anyway, in the meantime, it's been a pleasure having John Suttle as our guest today. Irish National Schools Trust, look it up on the website.